TaxAct can think of a million things more fun than filing taxes. TaxAct is going to name some now. Sitting in traffic. Folding a fitted bedsheet. Listening to your coworker talk about his fantasy team. Digging a hole. Digging an even larger hole next to that original hole. Unfortunately, TaxAct's filing software can't make taxes fun. But TaxAct can help you get them done. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome, folks. This is the More Money Show, and of course, that is the More Money Hotline song, Money by the Beatles. We try to help you make more money on this show. We talk a lot about economics. We talk about finance. We talk about politics. We normally steer clear of talking about foreign policy and national security issues because that's not my specialty. But it's hard not to talk about what is going on in the Middle East right now, given the continuing conflict there and the high price of oil. I just was checking right before I came on the air what the futures are for the oil price, and it is now running at about $98 a barrel. Yikes, that's a very high price. Remember, before the bombing started in Iran, we were running at about $60 a barrel. So this is a big, big increase in the price. And so you're probably looking, depending on where you live in the next week or so, if you haven't already seen these rising prices, you'll probably be paying somewhere but around $4 to $4.50 a gallon. Again, if you live in California, you're probably paying closer to $6 a gallon. So this is, this is a high cost that we all pay. As you all know, this is all a result of the fact, not entirely, but mostly a result of the fact of the supply chain problems in the Middle East. And incidentally, I get asked this question all of the time about why is it that, given that we're still producing record amounts of oil in the United States, why is it that the price of gasoline at the pump has gone up so much here, when a lot of the oil we consume is actually produced here? And the answer to that question is that this is a global commodity. And so it is all dictated by the world supply of oil, as a ratio to the world consumption. And so, when you have a cancellation of oil from an interruption in the supply of oil from the Middle East, that is going to affect the price you pay at your local filler up station. And so how long this lasts, I don't know, but it is certainly something that harms the economy when the price of gas goes up. And everyone can make up their own mind about whether they think that, this short-term pain is worth the long-term gain. I'm going to kind of stay out of that because it's just not my area of expertise. But we are all hoping fervently for a quick and victorious outcome in Iran, and an end to the murdering that was going on. By the way, tens of thousands of Iranians were being killed weekly, under that, evil regime. So that's the picture. I mean, we had a booming economy as of a month ago, and this has been, to use an overused analogy, this is a bump in the road, and we hope it's just a bump in the road, because I do believe once we get this over with, and I don't know how long this will last, but if it's only another month or so, and we get back to things as they were before, and if we get those ships running through the Straits of Hormuz, which I think will happen pretty soon, then we are going to see that gas price come down. The oil price will come down. That means there'll be less pressure on inflation. What worries me is that we're seeing the inflation rate tick up now because, as you all know, anytime the price of oil and gas goes up, energy is the master resource. It's embedded into everything we buy, the food we eat, the drinks that we drink, the house we live in, the manufactured products, the technology products, all run on energy. And if you have higher energy prices, then the price of just about everything else that we sell will go up because production costs rise. That means that when this is over with, and that price comes back down, you're going to see that gas price race right back down to the $3 range that we were in before all of this began. So I'm hoping for the best. I'm praying for the best. And I think, as I look at the reports on CNN and Fox News, it looks like things seem to be progressing pretty nicely, but a little slower than I might have hoped. We've got to get that channel open in the Straits of Hormuz. We've got to get that oil flowing because almost all of the Saudi oil, and Saudi Arabia is the second largest producer in the United States, in the world, that flows through the Straits. So if it can't flow through there, if it's not safe to send those ships through that zone, then you're going to see continued disruptions in supply. So we'll watch that very closely. It's troubling to me in the sense that we have the economy so strong. And it will be strong again. Trump has all the right policies. I just saw the president again this week. He has exactly the right economic policies on taxes. He's reducing regulations. And by the way, thank God we have drill, baby, drill. Thank God we're producing more oil and gas today than ever before. And I want to alert you all. Please go to our website, unleashprosperity.com. That's unleashprosperity.com. That's the group that Larry Kudlow and Steve Forbes and Art Laffer and I started. We have a superb website with all sorts of economic information. I hope you're all getting our hotline too, by the way. Go to unleashprosperity.com and just click on the hotline button and sign up for the free newsletter that comes out 5 mornings a week. And it's absolutely free. So there's not any reason why you wouldn't want to get it. And especially if you want to be the smartest person in the room, you should get the hotline every morning. But one of the things we've done on our website is we have kind of an energy primer, and it's about the policies that we have implemented under Trump and how they have changed the energy situation, the geopolitical situation with energy. And so what that site will show you is a few things that may or may not surprise you. In fact, when I helped put this thing together, I was surprised by some of the statistics, and I'm just going to give you some of these. Number one, we are, for the first time in 50 years in this country, the United States of America, this great, great nation of ours, is completely energy independent. And what I mean by that is we are now selling more, producing and selling more oil and gas than we are consuming. So we are now a net exporter of oil and gas. I was surprised to see that, but we are, and that's been the case for the last couple of years. That has meant that we are less vulnerable to the supply disruptions in the Middle East than we were before. Look, I grew up in the 1970s, folks. I was a teenager. I remember a young teenager in 1978, and I remember we would pack our car. I grew up in suburban Chicago, and my mom would pack us kids into the backseat of the station wagon, for those who are old enough to remember what a station wagon was. And we would drive that car to the local gas station, and we'd be 8th or 9th in line at 6:30 in the morning. That was when we had gas lines. I don't know if any of you remember when we had the odd even license plate. So if you had an odd number at the end of your license plate, you could fill up on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. If you had an even number, it would be Tuesdays, Thursdays, and so, it was this weird situation. I remember back then thinking, what's wrong with our country that we have to wait in line to get gasoline? But that, ever since then, that was the late 70s, and here we are now in the year 2026. And 50 years later, we're still having this turmoil in the Middle East. And so good news is that we are now a seller of oil on net rather than a buyer. That's number one. Number two, the United States of America, thanks to drill, baby, drill, and thanks to the fracking revolution and the shale oil revolution and the amazing technology of our drillers, we are now producing more oil and gas than any other country in the world. We are the single largest producer of oil and natural gas. And when it comes to natural gas, we actually produce more natural gas than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. So we are at a commanding position, thank goodness, to dominate energy markets as we go forward. Another thing that I want to say about the energy situation over the last 50 years is that if you look at a chart of the price of energy over the course since the late 70s till today, what you will find is every time we have some kind of turmoil in the Middle East, starting with remember the Iran hostage situation, and I think that was 78, 79, and 80. Ever since then, we've had flare-ups every 6 or 7 or 8 years in the Middle East, and every time that happens, we get a huge spike up in the price of oil, and it throws the entire world economy into turmoil. And that is why we have to continue to produce as much oil and gas and whatever else we got, nuclear power, hydropower. We should use everything we have so we're not dependent on these countries which are not reliable sources of energy. The Middle East is not a reliable supplier of energy. Finally, let me say this, that the price of oil will go down when the supply problems in the Middle East are solved. And in fact, the world is awash in oil and gas. So we could see $2.50 a gallon or $2 a gallon once the global supplies are fixed. And I think they will be. One last point before we take a break. I want to remind folks that this past week, I mentioned this on last Saturday's show. I want to mention it again. We celebrate this week the 250th anniversary of one of the greatest books ever written, certainly one of the greatest books on economics ever written, if not the greatest book. And that was Adam Smith's classic masterpiece called The Wealth of Nations. And what's really interesting about this, by the way, is that Adam Smith wrote that book. It was published less than 6 months before the second, maybe the most important document ever written about human liberty, and that was, of course, the Declaration of Independence. And I find it to be such an amazing coincidence of history that the two greatest documents that celebrate freedom and free enterprise and individual rights, the Wealth of Nations and the Declaration of Independence, 6 months apart. Don't you? I just find that to be an amazing statistic. So we're not just celebrating the 250th anniversary of our great country, but also we should be celebrating Adam Smith for teaching us how you create a wealthy nation. And there's no nation greater or more or healthier economically than these United States of America, folks. This is the More Money Show, and we will be right back.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. I hope you are having a wonderful weekend in the middle of March. And by the way, we have March Madness coming up for those of you who are basketball fans. So this is going to be, my favorite week of the year with sports, with like 60 different basketball games in college ranks. And so get ready for more of that. But we'll still have the show, by the way. Saturday, we will be live as we are right now. We are live and in color, one of the very few programs on the radio, because John Katsimatidis, in his infinite wisdom, has put together this blockbuster lineup with Larry Kudlow from 10 to 1, and then More Money Show from 1 to 3. For those of you living in the New York area, you get 5 hours of expert commentary on the economy, on what's going on in politics. And so it is a great privilege to me to have this show and to be in front of this microphone. And thank you all, for our ratings are so good, and we're good. We have high ratings because smart people like you are listening to the show. I wanted to give you, I asked my technician here, and my partner at Unleash Prosperity to give us a quick briefing on what is going on in Iran right now, what is going on with the military situation. I mentioned earlier the price of oil right now has risen to $98 a barrel, which is high, very high, although it briefly went over 100. So, Connor, what is the latest thing you're learning from the headlines?
Well, Steve, thanks for having me on. What we're seeing broadly is that the politics and the geopolitics and diplomacy don't stop just because the fighting's going on. So what we saw this morning with the U.S. military bombing out some of the infrastructure of Karg Island is really important.
What is Karg Island?
It is an island just off the coast of Iran, held by Iran, and it holds the facilities through which 80 to 90% of Iranian oil and gas exports flow through the outside world. And that's important because while we did take out the infrastructure where Iran can access that island, most of the infrastructure for processing it and getting it all shipped out is still relatively intact. So that's a warning. That's telling Iran, hey, all right, you've blocked these straits.
Right.
All right. And you're not letting oil from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, our partners in the region, the ones, even if they're not always, reliable suppliers, you're not letting them get through. Well, we're not going to let you through either.
I see. So what is your best bet in terms of how long it will take to get the straits open again?
Well, a lot of the talk of this bombing campaign has actually been for 6 weeks or more. And ultimately it comes to not just taking out all this infrastructure, and leaving some intact so that the Iranians know they have a way out if they come to the table, right? We've taken out enough on Karg Island so that it would take weeks to get back up, but not months or a year. And so what we're trying to get them to a point where they, kind of see the light while they're still feeling the heat.
Well, let's hope.
And it could go longer than 6 weeks, but it depends on how.
All right. Well, thank you for that quick update. So that is the latest and greatest that we're just all hoping and praying that they come to their senses and open up the strait. By the way, they need that oil too to be sold, or else their economy continues to collapse. So you never know with evil leaders what is going to happen. Folks, we'll take a break in a minute, and then when we come back, we're going to have on one of the top financial wizards in America today who can kind of tell you what's going on with the economy, what's going on with investments. That's Rob Arnott, who is a financial superstar. So please do not change that channel, because his words of wisdom you will greatly benefit from. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Rob Arnott, one of the top financial advisors in America, in just about 2 minutes. This is The More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I'm economist Steve Moore. I hope you're having a wonderful early spring Saturday afternoon. I hope it is nice wherever you are. We have stations and affiliates throughout the country, all the way from California down to Georgia, up to Maine. And so thank you so much for sharing some of your time with me and my guests to learn more about how the economy functions and finance and how you can make more money. Okay. So as promised, my next guest is, Rob Arnott, who has become a good friend. He's I think I first met Rob Arnott when we were helping Rand Paul, the senator who ran for president, in his campaign back in, I think that was 2016. And we have been, working together, now and then, throughout the last 10 years or so. And so, Rob, by the way, he is the chairman and founder of Research Affiliates, and he is one of the financial geniuses out there. So, Rob, thanks so much for joining.
I always enjoy these conversations.
Me too. So I've got a lot to talk to you about, Rob, and I'm going to start, if I may, Rob. I'm going to read two quotes from two of the world's greatest economists who ever lived, and I'd like your reaction, okay? So the first one is from Adam Smith. And as you know, I was just telling my listeners that this is the 250th anniversary of one of the greatest, probably the greatest book on the economics ever written, called, of course, The Wealth of Nations. And this is my favorite quote, Rob, from that book. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. That's quote number one. Quote number two is from another economist who you knew and I knew and had great respect for, and one of the greatest ever, Milton Friedman, who said that the primary lesson of the 20th century is that free market capitalism works and socialism is a failure. And then he said, but what all the historians seem to have learned is that socialism is a success and free market capitalism is a failure. So I'd like your reaction, Rob, to both of those statements.
Well, these days, the economics profession has had a complete takeover by neo-Keynesians. That's people influenced heavily by Keynes, but taking Keynes to the next level. Keynes said during difficult times, it's fine to ramp up government spending to stimulate the macroeconomy. And then you repay that incremental debt from deficit spending during the good times. Neo-Keynesians say, well, yes to the former and no to the latter. Let's continue deficit spending during the good times.
They want to borrow during good times and bad times.
Right, which is incredibly stupid. The Neo-Keynesians have taken over the profession, and so it's a house of idiots. Adam Smith is the greatest economist in history. And yet you can get a PhD without ever cracking the spine on either of Adam Smith's great books.
Right. You probably can. I bet a lot of these PhD economists have never even read Adam Smith.
Correct. They'll criticize him without having even read him. One of my proudest possessions is I own, which means I'm custodian for future generations, of a copy of his first edition.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Well, next time I visit you, I want to see a copy of that. Okay.
It is breathtaking. It was a 2-volume set with you wouldn't think so because it's a short book, but they used big fonts back then and thick paper. Anyway, he's a genius, and we all operate out of self-interest. I deliver asset management to people. Partly because I want to help them, and partly because I get paid for it. And I make a living doing that. And I can exchange investment advice and the development of interesting investment products in exchange for bananas and avocados at the grocery store, thanks to capitalism.
It's a wonderful thing. So,
it's a fantastic thing. And socialism, meanwhile, has killed more people in the last 100 years than all other systems combined. Literally hundreds of millions. Yeah,
and I had a meeting with President Trump a few weeks ago, and he was in a very good meeting. We talked a lot about things, and one of the issues we brought up was Cuba, and I think Cuba is a perfect example, Rob, of what you're talking about. So Cuba, before Castro took over and brought communism and socialism to Cuba, it was a rising country. You had a rising middle class. You had incredibly well-educated and productive people. And then what happened under Castro is that he took over, they put in communism. There was virtually no economic progress for half a century. And so I told Donald Trump, look, if you can, I'm not talking about military action. If there's some way we can liberate Cuba from these tyrannical economic ways, there's no reason Cuba couldn't be the Hong Kong of the Western Hemisphere.
There's absolutely no reason. People left to their own devices are entrepreneurial, creative, and they will do their best to develop ideas, products that people want, that people need. How many times have you looked forward to going to deal with the government? And how many times have you looked forward to going to a favorite store? The former is socialism. The latter is private enterprise. It's a wonderful thing. So
no, you're exactly right. So I think I don't understand quite how we have so many. Well, just last question on this, because I do want to ask you about the financial markets and the situation with the economy. But why is it, do you think, Rob, that what we've been talking about is pretty self-evident? I don't think there's anything very controversial about what we're saying. I mean, we have the facts on our side. We have history on our side. And yet, if you look at the new polls that keep coming out, consistent for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Young people think socialism is a better economic organizing system than free markets.
Socialism really means transferring wealth from those who create to those who don't. And the right tends to hate redistribution. I view redistribution as an is. It happens in every society. In some, like Venezuela, it takes from the poor and gives to the well-connected. In others, it can take from the wealthy and the doers and the makers and the creators and give it to those who don't. A small element of that, I think, is both harmless and reasonably necessary. Taking care of the disadvantaged and the people who really need it is something that a humane society does. Take it too far, and it starts to do some serious damage. And that's where the entire Western world is. The U.S., a little over 40% of our entire economy is government. In Europe, it's roughly 50%, ranging as high as 60 in a couple of countries. How can you have 60% of the economy controlled, centrally controlled, and have it make decisions that are wiser than millions of consumers deciding what they want?
So, Rob, you have done very well. You are one of the top financial advisors in the country. So I'm going to say that you are rich. And so I'm going to just ask this question flat out. Why shouldn't we put 60, 70, 80% on rich people like Rob Arnott?
Well, the reason is simple, because if the tax is high enough, the rich will stop doing what they do, which is to create ideas and products that people want. And the billionaire tax in California is a prime example. It's
disaster.
Only 5%, and it's only a one-time tax, but it's already triggered at least a half a dozen centibillionaires, people worth over $100 billion, to leave the state rather than pay the tax. And it's incredible stupidity, because these people, in order to avoid giving away 5% of what they've earned, are depriving the state of decades of future income taxes.
They're losing money because of this.
Why would you want to do that? Why would you want the Peter Thiels of the world and the founders of Google to leave the state and stop paying income tax to the state? It's just sheer insanity. And the rationale is, well, they should pay their fair share. They deserve, society deserves some of that money. Well, society already takes half of the money. So does it deserve more and more and more? At some point, people say no and they leave.
So, Rob, my favorite story about you among many is that when I first met you, we would have lunch in the most gorgeous place in the world, Laguna Beach, California, and there's no slice of heaven that's amazing like that. And I always enjoyed visiting you. And then a few years ago, you said, I've had it with California, and now when I visit you, you're in Miami, Florida.
Yeah, Miami Beach, and we live on the water on Biscayne Bay with beautiful sunset views over Miami. And it's also a little slice of heaven. So there are slices of heaven in various places. Here's the math that eludes Sacramento. If the top tax rate is 14%, which in effect it is, they think, why are people going to leave over 14%? Well, in Florida, I can keep 57% of my income. The federal tax officially is 37%, but when you add in Medicare and Medicaid and Obamacare tax, it pushes it up to 43. So I get to keep 57 cents on the dollar. In California, I take 14 less than that, which means 43 cents on the dollar. Going from keeping 43 cents to keeping 57 cents is a 33% raise.
Wow.
So
that's
a
amazing.
14% tax means a 33% raise for leaving. Mondami wants the top rate in New York City to go to 17%.
It's 17%
idiotic. Tax. Get this. A 17% tax means you're telling New York billionaires you can give yourself a raise of 42% by leaving.
Wow.
42%.
That's amazing.
Are billionaires going to leave New York City to?
You mean if you leave for a state that does not have an income tax?
Correct.
Yeah,
and migration also happens internationally. You can double your income if you move to Puerto Rico, but there's a lot of rules and strings attached to that. People move for various reasons. The Rolling Stones abandoned London, moved to Paris. Yes. They put out their Exile on Main Street album because they were exiled. And Keith Richards famously said, well, it's basically that England is paying us to leave. The top tax rate then was 90% in England. And I believe it was 75% in France. Huge tax rate. If you go from keeping 10 cents on the dollar to 25 cents on the dollar, you've more than doubled your income. So a little difference in tax, 15%, in that case meant 150% raised by leaving. Just crazy that people don't get this arithmetic.
It is, and the evidence is crystal clear about this. That we seeing states like Florida, we're seeing states like obviously Texas, Tennessee, Nevada, New Hampshire. The states that don't have an income tax have been booming, and Mandami is talking about this big tax increase. California is talking about a wealth tax. What you're going to find, if I understand you correctly, is many of the billionaires will move out of California. They'll move out of New York. And by the way, in both of those states, Rob, I know this from reading a lot of your stuff, the top 1 or 2% pay half of the taxes. So if they leave, who's going to pay the taxes? Yeah.
There's a politics of envy. People hate people who are massively successful. But
I don't. I
don't either. Unless you achieve massive success through corruption or crime, you achieve massive success through creating what people want. Jeff Bezos created Amazon. Bill Gates created Microsoft, and so forth and so on. These are creations that have massively changed the world for the better. And so what if they get billions and billions and billions for doing that? I think we should replace a politics of envy with a politics of gratitude. Some of us are like deeply
that. Hey, Rob,
grateful.
We have to take Rob, can I hold you over for one more segment, Rob? Because this is a fascinating conversation. I'm talking to Rob Arnott, who is one of the great financial geniuses of our time. Can you hold over one more segment, Rob?
Absolutely.
Okay, folks, this is the More Money Show. We'll be back with Rob Arnott in about 2 minutes.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Thank you so much for joining this weekend. I'm on with Rob Arnott, who is my guest. Rob Arnott is one of the financial geniuses of our country. He is the founder of Research Affiliates. Rob and I have been talking for the last 15 minutes or so about what's going on with the economy. And Rob, everything that you said in the previous segment, I agreed with, except one thing I disagreed with you about. And that is you said that there's a lot. And that is when you said that people are envious. They don't like rich people. And I don't think that's true. I mean, I think most Americans, when they see a Sergey Brin or a Tiger Woods or a Warren Buffett or a Jack Welch who built General Electric, I think we hold them out with great admiration. I think it's just the politicians, a small fraction of the left that regards these people as villains, not heroes.
I think that's probably true. I think there's probably a 20% cohort of the population who hates wealthy people, but it's certainly not 50%. The thing about politics and media is very simple. Politicians get votes and media gets eyeballs, or in our case, by promoting fear and anger. Nothing captures an audience or garners votes more than making people afraid and making them angry. So
that's a great point.
Cato Institute came out with a book a decade ago called 10 Global Trends That Every Smart Person Should Know. And it's a fast read. It goes through trends that are happening in the world that don't get reported. Case in point, there is more forest land globally today than there was 50 years ago, and by a decent sized margin. So much for deforestation. Life expectancy, we all know, has soared, and it's soared for reasons relating to capitalism. The biggest shocker to me was that in 1992, 42% of the world was living in squalid poverty, basically $1.50 a day to live on. And roll the clock forward to about 10 years ago, and when they wrote the book, and it had fallen from 42% to 7%. Now, for 7% of the world population, that is horrible. That's 500 billion people living squalid lives where they don't know if they're going to eat. But it's not 42%. Yeah. And there is no reason that 7% can't go in our lifetimes down to 2 or 3%, and then our kids' lifetimes down to 0.
There you go. By the way, there's a book that I wrote with the great Julian Simon about 20 years ago called "It's Getting Better All the Time: The 100 Greatest Trends." And we are now I'm updating that. I'm updating that now because it was 20 some years ago. But I've got literally 2 minutes left, and I left the most important question for last. Everybody's freaking about the markets. Rob, what is your strategy? Do we jump off the ledge? What's going on with these markets? What is your advice to people right now, given that we have $100 barrel oil right now?
Yeah, it's very simple. Most of the market doesn't like looking past a current crisis. What is the situation going to be in 3 years, 5 years? Are the Straits of Hormuz still going to be closed? It's possible, but not very likely. Is energy going to be widely available and back down to historic levels?
Yes.
Yeah, probably. Yes. That's the likelihood.
Yep.
So plan your investments accordingly. In the months ahead, you want to be in the portfolio that will benefit from the highly likely mean reversion, the trend towards past norms. Now, what does that mean for stocks? In the United States, you have a segment of the market, large growth stocks, notably the Magnificent Seven, that are priced for perfection. The AI will change our world beyond recognition, but it's in the price.
Yeah. Okay. So, hey, Rob, we've got to go. It's been a fascinating conversation. We have a hard out. That was Rob Arnott from Research Affiliates, one of the smartest guys know about finances. Thanks for joining in this first hour of the More Money Show. And for many of our affiliates, we will be back for a second hour. This is the More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. This is the second hour of the More Money Show. Thank you so much for joining in. By the way, that is the age-old question. Can money buy you love? I don't know. What do you think, folks? Can money buy you love? It can help, I would think, but we will see what you all think about that. For those just joining, we had a really fascinating conversation earlier on the show with, my friend Rob Arnott, who's one of the top, financial advisors in the country. And he was basically saying, look, don't sell now. Don't sell your stock. You never sell low. And he is exactly right that within, we don't know how long this is going to last in the Middle East. It could be over in a month. It could be, God willing, it's not going to go more than 6 months. And then when the tensions, are over, when this regime is gone and we have a sort of return to normalcy, the economy is going to pop up again. And so you do not, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just telling you what, Rob Arnott was saying that, I think it's just time to be patient and let's wait this thing out. Let's pray for our military that they have the successes, that we get that Straits of Hormuz open again, and that the oil supply is flowing again, the price of oil will go from $100 today to $50. So I can't tell you when. If I knew when, I wouldn't be doing the show. I'd be on the beaches of Tahiti. But what I'm saying is at some point we are going to see those prices fall. We're going to be victorious in the Middle East, hopefully, and hopefully it will not become a quagmire. And that means that we're going to see a lot of growth in the second half of 2026. I wanted to just bring up one thing before we take our quick break, which is that I get a lot of questions from my listeners about why it is we're not drawing down the Strategic Petroleum Reserve faster. And I believe Trump has started to pull some of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's the massive amount of reserve oil that we keep. I think it's in Texas. And the answer to the question of why we haven't done this so in other words, cushion the blow so that we don't see oil going up to the $100 it is at today. And the answer is, I've got a chart right here. It's amazing. What Joe Biden did when he was president was he drained the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So we had, when he came into office, 750 million barrels of oil. And he drew it down from 750 million barrels to 350 million. So that's he cut the supplies in half. Now, some of it happened because of the the Russia invasion of Ukraine. And so I could forgive, that was a justifiable cause for pulling out oil from the reserves. But the rest of it was because the oil price kept rising because Joe Biden declared war on American oil and gas. And so we did not have the supplies that we should have had. And so now we're very much in a tenuous situation because we don't have that much oil in the reserves to pull out because Biden used them to get reelected. That's what he tried to do. He tried to use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve as a political device, which is not what it is for. And now I read in the Wall Street Journal that they have to take out, we cannot use a lot of the oil in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve because it's in such great disrepair because of what Biden did. And so if you're angry about oil prices right now, we should remember that Joe Biden contributed to this kind of morass we're in right now by taking away one of our assets, which is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I am going to take a quick break. I will be right back with the man. I'm going to give you a little teaser on this one. This is the man who balanced the budget, the man who, the only time in 50 years that we have balanced the budget, it happened under my next guest, and I will be right back and divulge his name and his position. This is the More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I am very pleased to be with you on this Saturday afternoon. By the way, I'm going to try to sneak in some calls at the end of the hour. That More Money Show hotline number is 1-800-848-9222 or 1-800-848 WABC. That's easier to remember. 1-800-848-WABC. And I'd like to get some new callers. If you call, I love calling to, listening to some of our regular listeners because we have so much wisdom. But if you've never called in before to the More Money Show, I'm going to put you at the head of the line. Okay. So by the way, do we have Mr. Livingston?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so this is the answer to my quiz question that I presented to you right before we took our break, which is, who is the man who is the only person who's balanced our federal budget in the last 50 years. And a couple of my assistants here said, oh, that was Bill Clinton. And it is true that we balanced the budget when Bill Clinton was president, and he was there when it happened. And so he deserves certainly some of the credit. I always say that Bill Clinton, boy, I wish we had more Bill Clintons in the Democratic Party today. Bill Clinton was a genuine centrist Democrat in a party that's been unfortunately taken over by a radical left. But Bob Livingston was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee at that time, and he was the one who made the budget cuts, those tough cuts that Congress simply will not make today. And so, Bob Livingston, first of all, thank you for joining. I am saluting you for your great service to our country.
Well, that's a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much, Steve. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate your having me on. I first have to say that I apologize because the last time you had me on, I was sitting on a peaceful, quiet restaurant porch, and three ladies who had too much to drink came running out about that time, and I tried to run away from them, and I just couldn't do it. So I think my last appearance with you was a little disjointed.
No, but it was a great one, and that's why we're having you back by popular demand. So, by the way, Bob Livingston was, as you can probably detect from his accent, was a congressman from the great state of Louisiana, and he has a new book out called Rainbow Chaser. And when I saw the book, I said, we got to get Bob back on. But before we get into your book, Bob, go back to that period, which was one of the most exciting periods of my political career when, you and Newt Gingrich and Dick Armey and a team of great patriots came in and you, made the cuts. You grew the economy. We did have 2 or 3 straight balanced budgets, which is something I didn't think we would see in my lifetime. What happened? How did it happen?
Well, in 1995, the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years. We did it under the leadership of Newt Gingrich, who was our captain, and we presented our case to the American people, and they decided to put us in. And we wanted to be revolutionaries. We wanted to change things.
Right.
Newt made me the chairman of the Appropriations Committee over some rather senior guys, and I was determined that we were going to cut the budget. I wanted to cut the budget since the time I'd been in Congress. Totally, I served about 22 years in Congress, but those last 4 years were exciting. And I was chairman of the Appropriations Committee. I worked with Senator Ted Stevens, and together we and the Republicans controlled the Senate as well. And
let me just interrupt you for 1 second because I want to make sure our listeners understand. So the Appropriations Committee, you're the ones who are really in charge of how much money are we going to spend on each of these programs, and so it's a very important. You're looking at trillions of dollars of spending, and how are we going to allocate it? Where are we going to make the cuts? So that was a very powerful perch.
Yes, thank you, Steve. I have to say that it was the discretionary budget. All of the things that, whether it's the White House, the cost of Congress, the cost of the Defense Department, the cost of any of the departments of the government are funded by the Appropriations Committee. Unfortunately,
that includes, by the way, our military budget as well, right?
Absolutely, all of the defense budget, all of the executive branch, but the other part of the budget, which are now well over 2/3 of the budget, is entitlements, automatic payments to come from that provide benefits to people for all sorts of reasons. Some of which we understand are now being stolen by theft by people that don't deserve those benefits, but that's another issue altogether. Anyway, we balanced it. It was the first time that the discretionary budget has been balanced in decades, and it's the last time it's been balanced in decades.
Amazing. And so how'd you do it? I mean, because I remember back then there was a lot of opposition from the left about, people like you and Newt Gingrich were portrayed as the Grinch who was going to steal Christmas and, taking all these benefits away. But you pulled it off, and then we had a lot of revenue growth because the economy grew very rapidly at that time. What do you think was the key to that happening?
Well, it's a sheer determination. I mean, basically, my first day as chairman before the committee, I stood before them, and it's on C-SPAN. You may be able to pull it up today. I came out with a little short knife that I'd gotten from an alligator hunter, called an alligator skinning knife. And I said, we're going to cut the budget. And I said, if that's not enough, I pulled out a Bowie knife out of a bag and showed it to the committee. I said, then we're going to use a bigger knife. And I said, if that's not enough, I pulled out a machete and waved that around. And they understood I was serious.
Well, maybe that's how Malay in Argentina got the idea of the chainsaw. But I have to say, I was a young kid back then. I was a fiscal analyst, and I remember you guys said you were going to do it, but I have to be honest with you, Bob. I didn't think you could do it, and it was really an amazing thing. And by the way, one of the most important things about that era is you remember this. I mean, my gosh, a lot of the opponents were, oh my God, people are going to starve in the street, and orphanages are going to close down, and it's going to be the most that we're going to have all this pollution, and none of the negative things that they said would happen happened.
No, they never did happen, and it's the same thing with when Elon Musk came up with his Doge idea. Just this last year, you can do it because there's so much fat in the U.S. budget. We spend far too much money on unnecessary, duplicative, and awful programs. But then on top of it, there's the theft, and we're seeing more examples of that, like in Minnesota and California. So we really, even after Doge, we need to make a lot of cuts because this country is frankly in terrible shape. We're running out of money. And of course, with our ongoing war right now, it's all the more important.
So, great point. I was going to ask you about that, Bob, about, I am so angry about some of these audits are finding massive amounts of fraud, in Minnesota, in New York, and California. And one of the things I find really, problematic with the way we do our budget, especially now, these are more some of the what we call the entitlement programs, but we're almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you are the expert on the budget, but as I see it, we're almost rewarding states for wasting money because the more money they waste, the more money Washington sends to them.
Well, it's built into the system, and unfortunately, Congress has been asleep at the wheel too. We were on the Appropriations Committee. We did our job, and we did bear the discretionary budget. But it grew back. 9/11, frankly, just exploded the budget after I left. And that with our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and everywhere else, the budget just went out of kilter. And now we're trying to pare back, but we've got a big job ahead of us. We do have to try to get the theft under control. But I think, frankly, the whole country needs to come to some sort of reckoning, because if we don't, those people that are on Social Security and all on Medicare and Medicaid and other programs on which they really depend may find that the programs are going to have to be trimmed back because we don't have the money.
Right. I mean, it's amazing. You had, was it 2 or 3 or 4 years of balanced budgets? I forget. It was at least 3, I think.
I think it was 2 or 3. They came in as I was going out in 1999, and they lasted until 9/11. So about 2 years is what we had. And once 9/11 hit, Katie barred the door. It exploded.
I'll tell you, I remember towards the end of 2000, I think it was, when your budgets really took hold, and we're now running surpluses. There was a big, you may recall this, I'll never forget it. There was a big argument of, what are we going to do when we run out of debt? We're not going to have bonds to be able to sell because we're going to really, we're on a path almost to eliminate the debt. And here we are today with $36 trillion of debt.
Yeah, it's gone the wrong way. But you mentioned something that I have to give credit to. Bill Clinton had a lot of smart people around him. And I negotiated with his budget people. And I have to say, we were able to reach a compromise. That's when Congress and the system worked.
Yes.
Clinton got himself in trouble because of his own foibles. But frankly, his administration, once he found out that people didn't like his initial 2 years of spending it on everything, he came in. Remember, he said the era of big government is over. And he did it.
Can you imagine any Democrat saying that today?
They won't. They won't. No, so I got to give Bill Clinton a lot of credit for having a good last 6 years of his administration, and we honed in there and were able to work with him, and we made government work the way it was supposed to work.
You really did. And by the way, I'm so glad you brought that up about Bill Clinton, because, one of the guys who is one of the few Democrats who seems to making any sense these days is Rahm Emanuel. I don't know if you knew Rahm at all, but, he's saying, he's going on CNN and Fox News and saying, hey, the Democratic Party has moved way too far to the left. And I think he's right.
Oh, I think he's right. And I did know Rahm, and I think that he was mayor of Chicago, and he's
a good mayor. I'm from Chicago. He was
but he's not a crazy liberal Democrat. He's not part of the squad and all part of these really wacko leftists. And we need somebody in the Democrat Party who's going to lead them to common sense. And I think he's not the only one, other than Senator Fetterman, who I think has become really a superstar. But Rahm Emanuel, I think, would do a lot of good for the Democrat Party.
I think he would. Okay, we got just about 2.5 minutes left, and I apologize. I've left the best for last. And if we can't get through this, I want you to come on again because you're one of the listeners' favorites. Rainbow Chaser. What's that about? Your new book.
I'm a prosecutor. Was a prosecutor for 6 years before I went to Congress. I believe in criminal prosecution. But under the Biden administration, they took what is known as lawfare. It's a concept of using the authority of the government to go after individuals rather than after crimes. They abuse that system incredibly, and my book is about victims of lawfare. I know a little bit about it because I was a prosecutor, and I was a victim. I was a victim. Yes. They came at me, and I beat them. Yep. But there are a hell of a lot of people like Jeff Fortenberry, congressman from Nebraska, General Mike Flynn, Governor Bob McDonnell. That man had the best 4 years in Virginia, and you can only have 4 years. He had the best 4 years in 50 years of Virginia. And 2 weeks later, this guy, Jack Smith, indicted him and ruined his life. And it turned, and the Supreme Court ended up going unanimously that there was no law under which he was charged in the first place. I feel so sorry for McDonnell, but I feel so sorry for all these other people. I was charged, and they came at me, and I beat them, and I'm angry about it, and that's what the book
should be. Yeah. So, by the way, I have a fellow who I've gotten to know. He's been in jail for 10 years. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not a lot. His crime was putting Donald Trump, posters in front of his house in a liberal district in Maryland. They threw him in jail. They put him in the Baltimore prison. They made up charges against him. I think our justice system really is there's huge flaws with it. And there are I'm all for getting tough on crime, but we're putting people in jail for non-offenses we've turned politics into a game where if you lose, you end up in prison, and it's just awful.
Well, it's more than awful. It's tyranny. If they misuse the Justice Department against innocent American citizens, that is tyranny. We don't have a democracy. We don't have a free government because Lavrenti Beria, who was Stalin's right-hand man, said, "Show me the man, I can show you the crime," meaning that he could convict anybody if he wanted to. And they can. And the Biden Justice Department under Merrick Garland did exactly that. And I want to get even. I don't want to sweep this under the rug. I want everybody to read the book.
Yes. And by the way, Bob, you and I have to get together for lunch again soon because this is a major problem in this country. The justice system has been perverted. And if you have names, by the way, one of the things that people don't know about Donald Trump is he has pardoned thousands of people who did not belong in jail, for non-crimes. And he will, if you've got good evidence, he will pardon these people, Bob. So we ought to get together.
You know why? Because if he had 81 counts against him, it was lawfare against him. Right. He was the biggest.
He was the biggest victim of this.
And he all right, Bob, we got to run. Hire the lawyers. He had the money to hire the lawyers and beat them, and he did beat them, and he was victorious.
He did.
But all of these people get these charges against them, and they go bankrupt. They're forced to plead guilty. They get felonies for their life. It's a horrible system, and we've got to beat it. We've got to change it.
We do. I bet I was in court for 6 years on a bogus IRS charge against me. The government has unlimited money, and my attorney said, "Yeah, they say you owe the $100,000. It's clear you don't." But he said, "Just pay him the money because it's going to cost you more money to to take these people on." It's a corrupt system, and I'm so glad you wrote this book.
Well, thanks. It cost me well over $1 million to defend myself. Frankly, had I not had a business, I would have been bankrupted myself. And if I hadn't had good lawyers, I could have been convicted of a felony and sent to prison.
Yeah. Bob Livingston, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is the More Money Show, folks, and we will be right back. We're going to talk a little bit about politics in the next segment of the More Money Show.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks, and boy, that was a fascinating conversation. If you're just joining us with Bob Livingston, the former House Appropriations Committee chairman, the guy who balanced the budget. He is so right about this cancer that's going on in America, where our justice system has become political. We're putting political enemies behind bars. That's what happened under Joe Biden, and it is detestable. As I said in my segment with him, there's a guy named Caleb Bailey, who literally, in the area that I live in, he was in a very liberal district. He was nominated to be a Trump delegate. 1 week after he was nominated to be a Trump delegate, 14 BATF agents knocked on his door. They were in his house for 8 hours, going through every shred of material he had. They made up bogus charges against him. They said he had illegal firearms in his house. But gee, why did they raid his house in the first place? Maybe it's because he was a Trump guy. He had Trump signs in front of his house. He had to plead guilty because he didn't have the resources. He's been in jail for 9 years. And that is outrageous. And this thing, I have 100 stories like that. And you hear a story like that and you say, that could be me. If you're a Trump supporter. And look, both parties are guilty of this, but mostly it's the left who has used, the judicial system as a part of their war against conservatives. It makes me very nervous. Hey, we're going to switch to politics when we get back. John Fund, who you know from, he and I both worked together at the Wall Street Journal for many years. He's one of the top political minds in the country. Tom Del Vaccaro, who was the head of the Republican Party. And we're going to talk about how do we save New York and California, these two blue states that have gone over the deep end. We'll be right back, folks. The More Money Show. And don't forget, get the hotline. Go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up for your free newsletter. You will be the smartest person in the room if you get it.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We are back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Hope you're having a wonderful Saturday afternoon in the middle of March. It's a little chilly out, but it's sunny in most of the areas on the East Coast. So after the show is over, I always say the best way to stay healthy is be outside, get fresh air, get some sunshine. Hopefully you'll be able to do that this afternoon and tomorrow. My guest this afternoon for the final segment of the More Money Show is my friend John Fund. He and I worked together at the Wall Street Journal editorial board. I did the economics. He did the politics. He is now a writer. He writes all the time for Wall Street Journal still, but is also with National Review. You see him on Fox News and Newsmax all of the time. John, thanks for joining.
Pleasure, Steve. Thanks.
So you are in Argentina?
I am. Javier Milei is going to be speaking at a conference where he has foreign dignitaries from all over the world and academics trying to teach them Mileinomics, which of course is related to Moorenomics and Trumpnomics.
And Lafferonomics, right?
And Lafferonomics.
So is he popular?
About 50%, and it's not surprising that it's not more because people here are very cynical and disillusioned about politics. And also, there's been some unemployment. Inflation is still there. It's high by U.S. standards, 25%. But the rest of the economy is booming. There's energy has been released. Fracking is all over Argentina. The economy is stabilized. People no longer have to worry about putting their money under a mattress. They can keep it in banks and other savings institutions. And you can just tell that there's real confidence that there's a future for people's children and grandchildren.
Wow. And so, by the way, you're probably the furthest away we've ever had a guest on the More Money Show from New York City. You are in Argentina. And so let's check in on what you think is going on in New York, which is the home base of this show, obviously on WABC. So you just sent me, you also contribute to our Unleashed Prosperity hotline. It's another reason you should get that, by the way, folks. Just go to unleashedprosperity.com and sign up for the hotline for free. But you just sent me something the other day with all of these new taxes that are being proposed in New York City, which is like the most overtaxed place on the planet. And now they want a wealth tax, a yacht tax, or this tax, or that tax. What is going on, John, with the leadership in New York City?
Well, I think it's called Mommyitis. It's a disease that starts with a high fever, a desire, insatiable desire to eat more taxpayer dollars, and a firm, unalterable belief that government can never change, save money, or reform itself. So when you're under this fever, you start thinking about, having strange visions, and one of the top state assembly leaders in New York says, well, let's tax purchases of gold bullion. They don't currently pay the sales tax, so let's tax that. Let's tax crypto mining. And what's the excuse for that? Why, crypto miners, they don't have any employees. There are no public benefits associated with crypto mining, says one state assemblyman. They don't have any employees. They're just one person doing it. And let's see other ideas. Well, let's tax yachts. Run with Senator Kruger of New York. There aren't many private yacht owners, so it's great that we can tax these luxury items. How about mansions? New Jersey does that already. The state Senate wants to tax sales of property with values of $5 million or more. I can bet you in 5 years it'll be $1 million or more, and by then the average median house in New York will be worth that much. Let's tax helicopter rides.
Yeah, I mean, as you know. Back I think it was in the 90s, George Mitchell, who I think then was the Senate Majority Leader, had a yacht tax as part of their, tax the millionaires. And as you may recall, John, what happened as a result of that is it didn't hurt the millionaires. It hurt the middle class people who build yachts, because people stopped buying yachts. And so there was a huge unemployment in George Mitchell's own state of Maine, and he had to rush and try to get the thing repealed because workers were losing their jobs.
Well, in the early 1990s, Rhode Island, for example, had a thriving yacht industry based out of Newport and Greenwich, Rhode Island. And the tax, which only was in effect about a year and a half before Congress finally repealed it, it basically drove many of those dockyards into bankruptcy. They didn't come back. Today, yachts are made all over the world, but very few in the United States. And of course, they employ everyone from electricians to sheet metal workers to people who build masts. And it's astonishing that you have this idea crop up, because you'd think people would remember that, but of course it's been 35 years, so it could be ancient history to them.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And now you have a situation where New York and California are two of our largest states, two of our three or four largest states are. All they're doing is raising taxes. And you showed me this study the other day, John, about in California on the other side, on the left coast of America, they have this proposed wealth tax on people who make over $10 million. And I think you said already something like 5 or 6 billionaires have left California to avoid paying this tax.
Mark Zuckerberg is the 7th. He's leaving next month.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, it is so, because that study showed, John, that they will actually lose money by this tax because so many billionaires are going to leave and they pay almost half the taxes in the state. Well, who's going to pay the taxes when they leave?
Well, they'll suddenly discover that they no longer need merely a billionaire tax. They'll need a new millionaire tax. They'll need a new $100,000 tax. In other words, they'll keep going down the line until they reach the taxpayer and his name is yours.
Yeah. So, by the way, we have Tom Del Beccaro on now. We chased him down. Tom Del Beccaro is an expert on California because he led the Republican Party in California for many years. He's the patron saint of lost causes because not a lot of Republicans left in California. But Tom, thanks very much for joining.
Great to be on. Yes, there's no question this is going to hit the middle class. They did have a millionaire's tax in 2012, and it hit people making $250,000 a year. But if you look at the total tax structure, and you can't even buy a home in the Bay Area because of high costs. And also, you asked who's going to pay this. Well, they've been chasing corporations out who are domiciled now in Texas and other places because they see that California has a incredible long-term debt, whether it's infrastructure, whether it is pensions to the state unions. They see that bill coming due. They've been leaving for years, whether it's Charles Schwab, who loves California, whether it's Chevron, Valero's getting out. They don't want to have to pay taxes there anymore. And so they're just leaving. So this should be a textbook example to the rest of the country, what not to do and why not to vote for Gavin Newsom.
Well, it should be.
Steve, picking up on what Tom Beccaro said, not only is he right, but Yamaha has just announced it's leaving California for Georgia, one of our premier motorcycle makers.
That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand. I'm truly mystified by this. I mean, it's almost like they're, economic masochists because they keep putting in place these policies that are so obviously wrong, and so damaging to their state. And when we show them the evidence, Tom, that, the billionaires are leaving the state, they don't care. I mean, in other words, it's almost like they're trying to impoverish their state. In New York, too, I don't get it. These are the two largest blue states in America, and they're bleeding to death.
Yeah, if you remember when Obama was running and he wanted to raise the capital gains tax and he was on ABC.
Yes.
And he was asked, the evidence shows that it reduces it. Because the modern Democrat socialists, which many of these are, they live off of the issue of class warfare. That's what grips this party. The oppression, you made that money because you took it from me, which is economically absurd. Bill Gates got my money because I wanted what he had, not because he took it from me. Right. Or my old employers, I needed the money, so that's why I went to work. They didn't take their riches from me. I needed the money. But they don't, that's not their gig. They want social justice, and they refuse to read a book on economics.
So, Tom, as you know, the California for 50, 60, 70, 80 years was gain every decennial population. They were gaining more and more population and gaining more and more congressional seats. I think they topped out at 50. John Fund probably knows the number, 50 some congressional seats. And now John Fund was telling me that they could lose up to 4 congressional seats in the next decennial, when we do the redistricting in 2030. That's never happened before in California. By the way, New York is going to, I think, lose another 2 or 3 or 4 seats as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the middle class, if they can, moving out for greener pastures. And by that I mean where they can find jobs. The great demographer Joel Kotkin has talked about how California is being hollowed out. It's a place for the poor, the rich, and those in government jobs or pensions. And so they're looking between the highest standard or the highest cost of living in the world and their ability to buy homes and bring up their children. They look at this long term, 20 years, and they don't want their children to struggle. I mean, there's true belief that a child can't buy a home, so they're going somewhere else. And again, Gavin Newsom talks about, it's the fourth biggest economy in the world, but that's because of what the private sector does. It's that way despite Gavin Newsom's policies and despite these wealth taxes, but it's not always going to be that way because businesses don't have to be in California.
Well, another good example is Standard Oil of what was once Standard Oil of New Jersey, which I believe is Exxon now. They moved out of California. We may have lost John.
Well, one of the reasons why California gas prices, I'm here. One of the reasons why California gas prices probably $2 or $3. Hello?
John's kind of fading in. John, you're kind of fading in and out. We'll try to get a better connection with you. So, but Tom, you know exactly what John was just talking about.
What he was about to say. He's about to say they have the highest gas. Yeah, they have the highest gas taxes in the lower 48, but they also have, quote, environmental programs. They use gas tax. It's another form of tax, which they impose on drivers because they want to stop people from driving. They do understand that in economics. If you price something too high, people do less of it. They get that. They don't apply it to income, but they get it with gas. So they take that money and they pay for these environmental justice programs, among other things. But the problem is, as you know, it's the most regressive tax you can imagine because it is the middle class and the less fortunate that have to drive the most. The rich can work from home or have small commutes. So they're hurting the poor once again.
Well, that's why they have, what's the old saying that the liberals love the poor so much they'd have us all be poor, and that's exactly what's happening. And by the way, California is one of the highest, it's one of the richest states, but it also has one of the highest poverty rates.
Yeah, it does, because so much of the economy is stagnant. It rests its laurels on high tech, some of Hollywood. There are some sectors that do particularly well. But from COVID to today, the small businessman was killed in California. And, this is just the mentality you were describing earlier. By the way, for the last 15 years, approximately 145,000 people have paid half the income tax. Well, you know what?
That's amazing.
They can move, and they have been moving, and that's why more and more the middle class.
And it's, by the way, most of our listeners are in the New York area, but I think it's that's what I call the blue state disease. And it is a disease, and it's affecting Rhode Island. It's affecting New Jersey, Connecticut, my home state of Illinois, obviously California, Massachusetts. Tom, I mean, why is it so hard for them to figure out the states with the highest taxes on income are also the states that are losing their high income people? And incidentally, I want to make one other point and then throw it over to you. Studies show that people who are multimillionaires and billionaires, that 90% of the gain, in other words, 90% of the gain for when they invent a business or they come up with a new concept or have a patent for some new invention, 90% of the gain from that goes to other people, not the person who invented it or started the business themselves. So when you say, well, we hate billionaires, guess what? Yeah, maybe they have $1 billion, but the rest of the economy got $10 billion.
Yeah, absolutely. Just think about it. A modern invention. Think of the iPhone and the smartphone, which 25 years ago we knew nothing about, but it created an entire industry. And an industry for all the app makers and on and on and on, all the suppliers. The same for the automobile, which at the time was decried. Oh, you can't do that. But it's now automobiles and the associated industries, repairs, tires, that is something like 18% of the economy or more. So yes, it's everything that occurs around that. But again, these people don't understand economics. Speaking of which, our friend Scott Bessent said that Newsom was economically illiterate. Well, he came up with a whopper last week where they were talking about a gas tax holiday, which I favor. And oh, by the way, so does Larry Kudlow. But you didn't mention that on TV the other day, Mr. Moore, that we should have a gas tax holiday. But Gavin Newsom said,
by the way, I am in favor of that as long as the price is, $100 a barrel. We should do that. I agree with you.
I'm just teasing. But Newsom said there's no guarantee if I do that there will be savings at the pump. He said the oil companies will pocket it. This is the total illiteracy. So let me get this straight, Gavin. A consumer pays the tax, which then the company has to pay the city, the state. But if there's no tax and the consumer doesn't pay it, somehow it's going to be pocketed by the oil company.
Ridiculous.
I mean, I call it, this is a Newsomism. Yogi Berra? We're now in the Newsomism phase of life, and people need to understand that this guy truly does not know what he's talking about. He's just a demagogue.
But you know what? And you know him personally, don't you?
I haven't met him, but I don't think he wants to meet me.
Okay, because I've met him a couple times. One time I was on the Real Time show with Bill Maher, and he was on as a guest as well. I have to say the guy's very charming, and he's very spiffy, and he doesn't have a hair out of place, and he's buttoned up, as my wife would say, and he's kind of a Bill Clinton type. He reminds me a little bit of Bill Clinton. He's very slick, and that's what makes me, despite the fact that everything you've said about him is right, he has this kind of personality that makes people think he's a moderate.
Yeah, no, he's not a moderate at all. At the end of the day, people need to judge whether someone's moderate or conservative by how much they've increased the size of government during their
That's
term.
Right. Yeah.
And California's budget will have virtually doubled during his term. There's nothing moderate about that. He's the one who signed the law where all these pedophiles now are getting early release and murderers. There's nothing moderate about public safety. You're either for it or you're against it. And the list can go on and on with him.
Yeah. Well, Tom, you are a regular on our show. By the way, your latest book is The Divided Era?
No, The Lessons of the American Civilization. Before that, we had The Divided Era, both of which are particularly prevalent today, because if you think of the modern Democrat, if they had existed at the time of the Revolution where George Washington struggled for 6 years, we'd still be eating
that's true.
tea and crumpets.
All right. So, Tom, we got to take a break. Thanks so much for coming on. By the way, John's Fund, there in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be right back for our last segment of the More Money Show, folks, and I hope you're having a wonderful weekend.
The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The More Money Show with Steve Moore.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Back, folks, this is the last segment of the More Money Show. We just got a couple minutes left. I want to remind you that the reason you listen to the show, hopefully most of you who do listen, do it because you care about our country. You care about being educated about how our economy works. You want to obviously make more money. One of my great mentors was Ed Follner, the founder of the Heritage Foundation some 50 years ago. And Ed used to say, in the war of ideas, there can be no pacifists. You have to be involved. Freedom is not free. We have to fight back against what's going on in New York City, what's happening in Chicago, what's happening in California. Blue state liberal politicians are systematically taking our freedoms and our prosperity away. Thank God we have someone who cares about American business and the American future like Donald J. Trump. But every one of us has to do this. That's why I spend every Saturday afternoon with you all. I love doing it. It's a proud achievement for me to have this show. But we have to fight back. We have to preserve freedom. That's what our founders did, and we need to do what our great founding fathers did 250 years ago. Folks, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. We will be back, same bat time, same bat channel on the More Money Show. So have a great weekend and join us next week. And we are signing off.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?